starting an eye bank. Come in if you like. And that was such things as this. Eye banks, you know, are for corneal transplants. The surface of the eye is exchanged so that the person can have vision restored. And it has to be a human eye. And there were nobody who wants to give their eyes at that time. But there were 77 electrocutions in the year when he decided that he would go up to Sing Sing when he was called by the head honcho who would say, come on up here because we're letting the guy go today. And they're all men. And he would see them in advance, and if they gave their permission, and what do you call the head of the prison?
The warden.
The warden had already talked to them, and so it was cleared. And he would come back with the corneas after the electrocution, keep the whole eyes at that time in our icebox, which was a great dismay for somebody in our we had a cook, and she quit. But he would then use the corneas for transplantation. But here's the point of mentioning this. He got a great deal of criticism from within the profession for doing this. For not so much for the idea, which was a little bit far out, but for the fact that his name appeared in the newspapers. That was considered something that was unacceptable for a medical doctor in the 1940s to have this happen. It seems like just around the corner. Because I too, 81, I'm a couple of weeks away from 81, so I have great empathy with you. But he braved those things because he was so convinced that this is something that really should be done. He was my mentor. I grew up, I went to school in New York after we moved up from Baltimore, where I was born. It was an entirely different atmosphere from what I had known when I was the first 5 or 6 years of my life. And I went to a school in New York, and I went away to a hill school in Pennsylvania, where I met my long-standing friend James A. Baker, who became my roommate at college. And he's a person who crops up throughout this book. Somebody that really has meant an awful lot to me in the course of years, because I think he's been a wonderful statesman, a great diplomat, but also a very loyal friend. So we roomed together at Princeton. And at Princeton, for the first time, the fact that I was a slow reader began to become increasingly apparent, because I'm not a terrible reader. In fact, I had expected I will do some reading to you. You'll see that I'm not all that great at reading. But in mathematics, I was really impaired, seriously impaired. I mean, that was very embarrassing circumstance. But dyslexia was not diagnosed when I was there. And I got into Princeton with a 23 percentile in my spelling in SATs. And my grandfather had been in Princeton, my father had been in Princeton, my great uncle had been there, and he was an Egyptologist, and he left his books to the Princeton Library. So I had this feeling that I was a legacy, that I got there. How did I get there? You know, it's an uncomfortable feeling when you feel that maybe you're here under somebody else's auspices, or thanks to somebody else, my mentor, my dad. Well, it got worse, because I decided that I also wanted to be an eye doctor, as he was. And in order to do that, I had to get to medical school. In order to do that, I had to write a senior thesis at Princeton, which was a real challenge, because I was in the biology department, but I had no idea what I could write about. I couldn't do voluminous reading in the short period of time that I left for it. But a classmate of mine named Paul Kuntz, who's now a doctor in Kansas, asked me if I would help him with his proposed thesis, and we got permission to write it together. It was a simple thing like this, and there's a reason that I'm telling you this. He wanted to figure out how slime molds growing on agar plates, how fast they move in relation to the size they were. And he couldn't figure out, they were like a worm going in the agar all over the place. My role, and I give you my pledge, it was only this. In those days, you had map markers with a little tiny wheel in the bottom, and you'd hold it over the map, and you could tell how many miles one house was from another, out your destination, by this thing that went up like that. And so we held the auger plates in front of these great big projectors that used to take the big squares of projection, rectangles, and hold it up, and then found out what the ratio of that was to this, and then figured out from that how long these little traces were, and then we measured the size of each little slug, and we found out that the size of the dictyostelium discordium, that's these things, was in direct relationship to the speed of their migration as they went across things. Dr. Bonner, for whom we were writing this paper, said, "Oh my God, we got a wonderful conclusion." He gave us each highest marks on the paper. It was marvelous. Paul did the writing and did all the arithmetic, which I couldn't do. I was accepted into Johns Hopkins Medical School, a dyslexic without any particular, now I tell you in advance, without modesty and without professed pretense. I have a very average brain. But there was something that happens in dyslexics, which I think is, which I didn't know about, but I've deduced it as the years have gone on. And that is that if you are not able to keep up with your classmates in school, in some respects, particularly if you're in medicine and you have to get up early and read late into the night to find out what the disease like Sjogren's may be, you have to try extra hard. But if you have, well, here's the thing, if you have a dyslexic brain, and this is not my observation, this is now well known, there's something on the left side of your head that is not working in that brain very well. But when that's impaired, the other side of your brain takes over with the area of your brain that provides creativity. And creativity has been characteristic of many of the great inventions that have been made by, take the person who invented British Airlines, is it, or Virgin Airlines, or whatever. He's a very known, but there are many examples. Even Einstein claimed to be dyslexic.
Yeah,
so
what he was 4.
Yeah.